Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here with you today to share in the North Fulton Master Gardeners Fall Gardening Lecture Series. Today's presentation will be on creating a breathtakingly beautiful cutting garden. We'll talk about the what, the where, and the how. So let's get started. A little bit about who I am. My name is Pat Camp, and I have been a master gardener for 26 years. That's hard to believe. I have a degree in horticulture. I've worked as a landscape designer at a um, local nursery. I am a certified plant professional, and this is my fifth year uh, being um, a growing a designated cutting garden. I completed the Floret online workshop, which is a workshop that's dedicated to focused on growing flowers on a small scale. And I've always enjoyed making flower bouquets for flowers for friends and family. And whether it's from flowers from my garden or flowers from the store. We're having a little technical difficulty. So just bear with us just a moment. We're not getting the screens to come up. There we go. Technical team is working diligently. We'll have this sorted out in just a minute. Please bear with us.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dana. Um, okay. So I have a little housekeeping information I'd like to share with you before we get started. If you do have questions for me, we will take those at the end of the presentation. So be sure and put those in the Q&A box. If you see a slide that you'd like to take a picture of, feel free to take a screenshot of that. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on the North Fulton Master Gardener Facebook and YouTube channel. And if you did register for this webinar, you will be getting a link to those. Okay, let's get started here. I thought we'd start out on my first slide with some beauty. We have a beautiful little girl who happens to be my granddaughter and a beautiful bouquet of flowers. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. What is a cutting garden? What's the definition of a cutting garden? What requirements, basic requirements, do you need to have for a cutting garden? Planning the garden, deciding what to grow. And believe me, that's going to be the hardest part because you're going to want to grow it all. Um, Planting, growing, and maintaining. After you plan, then you plant. Proper harvesting. There are basic ways to harvest your flowers and your foliage for the longevity of both, and we'll be talking about those. We're going to be talking about floral arranging basics and foliage and fillers. And then we have a short video for a flower arranging demonstration. And then, like I said, at the very end, we'll take your questions. So, what is a cutting garden? A cutting garden is grown specifically for harvesting flowers and foliage to use in arrangements. And this can include shrubs, perennials, bulbs, annuals. The key word in this first sentence is harvesting. You're growing flowers to cut and bring inside. When you grow a vegetable garden, you grow a vegetable garden to grow the vegetables, bring them inside and eat. You really don't grow a vegetable garden to look at it and look at the vegetables laying on the ground. Well, kind of the same is true for a cutting garden. You grow a cutting garden to cut the flowers. It will be beautiful. And in the middle of the summer, there's nothing more glorious than a whole field or a whole little garden full of blooms. But it is grown, to harvest. Um, it's not really grown, like I said, for display, but it will be beautiful. Now, in the fall, when everything kind of starts to die down a little bit, it'll look a little spent. But in the summer, there's no more beautiful place. The size depends. Okay, and so that brings up a point. Do you want to see your cutting garden from your house, or do you want to kind of tuck it away someplace where you can't see it? And this is just personal preference, wherever you would like, wherever you feel comfortable seeing it. The size depends on the space you have. In full sun, it needs full sun, and the time you have to maintain it. And really, you can put a designated cutting garden just about any place. If you have room in one of your landscape beds that you have irrigation, please, take a couple of packets of seeds and sprinkle them in there and grow in one of your landscape beds or raised beds. If your soil is just horrible or you have a lot of underground wires and things, um, do a raised bed. That way you bring all your soil in. Or community garden. There are so many beautiful community gardens where people grow vegetables and flowers too. Or you can just grow flowers. But community gardens are a good way to go, especially if you just don't have any sun in your yard at all. And then if none of that works for you, you can use a container. The large animal troughs that they use for animals are great for cutting gardens. You can even paint those. They're metal, but you can still paint them, and they're beautiful. Just make sure that you put some holes in the bottom of any container that you use. I'd like to show you some pictures. The middle picture is my cutting garden in the spring. It's kind of a kidney shape, and this is after I've planted my seeds. Most of the seeds I sow directly. And most of my plants that I plant in my cutting garden, like my basils and things like that, I grow from plants. I don't grow those from seed. And I do have a few perennials kind of on the edge of my cutting garden, and you can see my cutting garden from my deck because I just think it's so beautiful. I want to see it. But anyway, so this is my garden in the spring. This is probably, third week in April. And then the pictures on both sides are when my cutting garden is start to bloom. On the right-hand side, you'll see the African basil, which when you walk past that, it hums with all the bees. And on the other side is, I grow a lot of zinnias. That's my favorite cut flower to grow. And even there's a little zinnia that jumped out of my garden, and I just left it. It was so pretty and growing so prolifically. I couldn't pull it up. Okay, so requirements. What do you need? Okay, it needs to be in 6 hours of sun, located away from an area that has standing water or large tree roots. Anytime you have a large tree root, that root is going to grab all your nutrients and your water, and it's not going to leave any for your garden. So pay attention to that. Be sure to get your soil tested through the county extension office. If you live in North Fulton, that would be the Fulton County Annex in Sandy Springs. If not, find out where your county extension office is and get your soil tested. I test my soil every 2 years in my cutting garden. If you live in Atlanta and have lived for a long time, you know our soil is very acidic. And more than likely, if you've never grown a garden where you're wanting to put your cutting garden, you're going to need lime. And this soil test will tell you, and it'll tell you what other minor nutrients you need, but it's very important to get that soil test. Most annual flowers perform on a more neutral, not acidic and not alkaline. So they like a 6.3 to 6.8 pH. In addition to the initial soil amendment, you want to add fertilizer during the growing season. So you've got these little tiny seeds and you're planting them in the ground. And basically what you're saying is, okay, little seed, you're going to grow and you're going to produce flowers, bunch of flowers all season long until frost. Okay, we got to give those little seeds a little help. So in addition to your initial amendments, and I always add compost in the spring, even if I don't do even when I do a soil test, I always add a little compost because I like to feed my soil. So, so you're going to need to add an additional fertilizer. And I like to use organic fertilizer, which is a little slower release than some of the synthetics, but I'm feeding the soil. So you need a little more fertilizer. And you want to provide at least 1 inch of water each week, especially when those little seeds are germinating and they're little tiny seedlings. Drip irrigation is really the best. You want to water the roots, not the foliage. Okay, let's plan your garden. So the first thing you want to do is create a list of plants you want to grow. And this will be the hardest decision because you're going to want to grow them all. Believe me, don't try and do that. Pick some for your very first time that you really, really like. Look through the seed catalogs. Go online. Look at all the different seeds to choose from. There's so many beautiful, beautiful flowers you can grow from seed. And make a list. Make a list of what you'd like to grow. Include lots of different colors, blooms, shapes, textures. You don't want everything to look the same, or then maybe again you do. This is your garden, and these will be your flowers you bring inside. So you decide how you want it to look. You may like cool flowers more. You may like me. I like the pinks and the purples, the blues, the pinks, dark pinks, light pinks, all of those. That's kind of the range that I like. You may be different. You may like the hot colors. Whatever you like, decide. And that's the ones that you will grow. You want to measure your garden area and do a rough draft of where you'd like to place each type of plant. This doesn't have to be set in stone. This is not drawn to scale. It's just to give you an idea of where you're going to put your plants. They can even be planted. You can even plant flowers in rows like you do your vegetables, which is kind of interesting. That's the way flowers farmers do it. And you want to include space around the exterior of your garden so you can get into and harvest, and also within the interior of your garden. This is a sample. This was from a couple of years ago of my cutting garden. As you can see, there are stepping stones in the middle, and even now I have stepping stones going out on either side. because I'm kind of short. You want to be able to harvest. Like we said, that's why we're growing these beautiful flowers, to harvest the flowers and bring them inside to enjoy them. You will enjoy them outside, but you want to enjoy them inside as well. So this is just kind of a basic and something I have found, even if I have a plan, when I go out to plant, I always kind of move things around. So this is not set in stone, but it'll just give you a general idea about where you want to plant your flowers and your foliage. Okay, so now we've kind of decided what we want to do. Let's get hopping here. So you want to buy your annual seeds from garden centers or order them from nursery seed catalogs. There are so many different seed companies that you can find online and some seeds in your garden centers, but you always want to order 25% more seeds. I had a first-hand experience with this. I had some sunflowers that I had created a little bed, and I was so excited because I couldn't wait for, I've never grown sunflowers. Well, guess who visited the sunflower seeds? The squirrels ate every one, and I watched them do it. So you will lose some seeds. Some of them won't germinate. Some of them the critters may get. So you want to always add a little extra when you're ordering seeds. You want to buy annual plants, and annuals, of course, are classified as having only one season of growth. And these are my basils. I like to grow lots of different basils. These are not considered, well, some of them may be culinary, but I grow them for the foliage to put with my flowers. There are hardy annual seeds and tender annual seeds. Tender are grown during the summertime when it's hot. They like the heat. Hardy are grown when it's cooler. They won't have as long of a bloom time, the hardies won't, but they're just so fun to grow. An example of these are larkspur. I grow, excuse me, I grow larkspur, nigella, which is love in a mist, which has a beautiful little bloom, and then it makes a little seed pod. Dara is another one that I've really gotten into growing, and also bachelor buttons. Like I said, they won't have as long of a bloom time. And before I plant these, I always pop the seed packet into the freezer because they like cool weather, and this seems to help them germinate. Okay, the tender annual seeds need to be planted after the last frost rate. And I really even go beyond that and do 2 weeks later because they're not going to start growing until it's 60 degrees. And I don't like to put my seeds in the ground before I know they really have a chance to start growing because, like I said, something could get them. Those little critters could find them and get them. So you want to be sure and wait till the soil has warmed up. We have been realigned. We used to be 7B zone, and now they're saying we're 8B. A lot of people disagree with that. And of course, these are determined by how cold it gets. So for 8A, which is what they say North Fulton is now, they're saying our frost date is April 10th. Okay, I still will wait 2 weeks after the frost date because things can happen and I don't want to lose anything. But you want to wait till after the frost date for your tender annuals. Okay, examples of these, and these, let me tell you, these are drought tolerant and they are so easy to grow. Zinnias, marigolds, cosmos, celosia, and they're called cut and come again because they literally, you cut them and they come again. They're great, especially for a beginner. And I still, these are my favorites. Zinnias are my favorites. If you're new to growing a cutting garden, start slow. Plant several different annual plants and direct sow 2 or 3 seed packets. if you're excited about this and want to do this, you're going to want to jump right in and do it all at once. Go slow, start slow, and just kind of see what you do for the first year and maybe add a little bit more each year that you grow. That's what I've done. And believe me, there are more flowers you're going to want to grow than you're going to be able to the first year. Seeds can be saved from one year to the next. If you have an abundance of, if you have extra seeds after you've planted everything, you can save those. Just make sure they stay dry. It's real important for them to stay dry and in a dark area. And you'll probably have just about as good a germination rate for the second year as you did the first year. Keep track of what you planted in a gardening journal. Record your rainfall temperature, what you like, what you didn't like. I have found this so invaluable. I had a friend one time who thought I was crazy when I started talking about a gardening journal. You can use a loose leaf notebook. You don't have to have a fancy, but just record what happened that year in your garden. What you liked, what you didn't like, what you would grow again, what you would definitely not grow again. If you don't have success with a flower one season, don't see it as a failure, but learn from it for the next year. Isn't that what we gardeners do? We learn, we learn. Who was it? Thomas Jefferson said that I am an old man, but a young gardener. Very true, very true. Um, on the left are some of my gardening journals, and I love to go back and look. And then anytime that I plant seeds, I always put a stake in the ground to remind me what I plant. Because sometimes you forget, or sometimes when a flower comes up, you say, now, which one was that? Because I want to repeat that again. So it's just a good idea to do. Okay, let's plant. So prepare the space. You're going to incorporate all the soil amendments. And there will be roots, even if you pull everything up from the year before, there will be some roots and debris. So make it nice and smooth. Water the soil. You don't want it wet, soggy, but you do want it wet. So those little seeds can get in there and grow. Plant your annual and perennial plants at the correct planting time following the recommended spacing. And you want to mulch your area once you get everything planted, because that's going to hold your moisture in and as well as keep down weeds. Once the seeds sprout, it's important to thin. And I have to say a little word of caution. A lot of times on zinnia packets, they say punch a hole, do a hole for the recommended spacing and put 3 seeds in a hole. Don't do it. Zinnias want to grow. They want to grow. And you're going to have 3 little plants right there together. What I like to do is, and I think the spacing is 1/4 an inch. I take my finger and I make a little trough, and then I sprinkle very lightly the seeds in the trough and cover them. And that way, when they come up, you can see exactly where they are. And you can move those little seedlings that are too close to the other ones to a different spot in the garden. Maybe you had a little area where some of your seeds didn't come up. They're easier to move that way. And I will say a lot of the seed packets recommend 12 inches. I follow what several of the flower farmers who I follow do as far as spacing, and they space their annuals 9 inches apart. And the reason for this being, you can get more flowers in a smaller space, which is the way I'm gardening with my flower garden. So I can get a lot more, and I don't have a lot of weed pressure because really there's no sun for them because all my plants are way up here. So anyway, that's just the way I like to do it. Okay, when branching annuals reach 12 to 18 inches high, not every annual is a branch. But what I mean by that, when they start to grow, they can branch. Now that you have single stem sunflowers who are not branching, but you have branching sunflowers too. So when branching annuals reach 12 to 18 inches high, you want to snip the top off just above a set of leaves or like 3 or 4 inches. And what this is going to do is tell the plant to branch and produce more flowers. And you're going to have a hard time doing this the first time because you're going to say, it took me all this time to get these planted and they're growing and I've got to cut them. Yes, you do. Do an experiment. Do one zinnia, don't pinch it. Do another zinnia, cut the top out. You will have twice as many blooms on the one that you cut the top out, the branch. So branching and pinching is very important. Occasionally you will have powdery mildew because we do have hot, humid summers, and Millstop is a really good organic fungicide. I do garden with my flowers organically, but there are 2 other fungicides if you need to use one of those. When temperatures get 90 degrees, could you believe we had 90 degrees in June this year? You will need a supplemental water. And that was true of all of our landscapes. It just gets so hot, the plants can't grow. So anyway, you will need a little extra water for that. And deadheading is necessary to keep the plants in continuous bloom. If blooms are not harvested but stay on the plant, they need to be removed before they go to seed, because when a flower starts to produce seed, this signals the plant to stop making flowers. And we certainly don't want that to happen. So even if you're on vacation, when you come back, you see all the dead blooms, just cut the bloom off. You don't have to cut down the stem, but you don't want to signal that plant to start making seeds, because that's the natural progression. You want to cut that bloom off. Okay, so to ensure an abundant harvest of flowers, you want to thin after you plant. You want to pinch when they get to a certain height so they'll branch, and you want to deadhead. And these are some pictures. I just love the one on the left. This is a bucket of zinnias that I've already cut. I don't know if you can see it or not. And this little bumblebee sat in the middle of that flower for 45 minutes. It was so cute. You will have pollinators like crazy in your cutting garden. Oh my goodness. And the bees and the butterflies are all over. I've had hummingbirds, I've had the hummingbird moths, that are so sweet. And then the picture of the monarchs. This was the middle of October. This was last year. You can tell, the leaves, some of the leaves are kind of dead. But I couldn't get all of them in the picture. I must have had 7 or 8 monarchs in my cutting garden. And I'm sure they were on their way to South America and looking for something to eat. So they stopped by to see me. But you will have so many pollinators that come to visit your cutting garden. Okay, now let's talk about harvesting. Once we've grown all these beautiful flowers, let's talk about harvesting. Each flower variety has its own stage to harvest. And you look on the back of the seed packet or the tag when you buy a plant, or if you can't find that, just Google when to harvest. And harvesting for zinnias is really easy. Zinnias have the long stem, and if you go down probably about 8 inches and shake the stem back and forth, if the flower head on top stays with the stem, you're good to go. That one's to harvest. But if you shake the stem and the flower just kind of plops all over, it's not done. So don't cut that one yet. Cosmo, you cut those at the cracking bud stage. Well, what is that? That's when you see a little bit of color showing in the bud. And that's when you cut it before the bees get it. So, and like I said, each flower variety has its own stage to be cut. So it's important to kind of figure out what that is. You want to harvest in the coolest part of the day, either in the morning or late afternoon. And to be quite honest, I would, in the middle of the summer, I would do it early morning. I mean, get your coffee if you must, your tea, but get out there early before the heat comes. You want to take, I say a bucket. I usually take like 3 buckets and put cool water, fill them about halfway full. And that's what you want to put your flowers and your foliage in. Immediately after you cut it with clean snips on an angle, and you put your flowers and foliage directly into those buckets. A flower stem is like a straw, and you don't want that to get gunked up, or it's not going to be able to drink. So the sooner you can get those flowers into the water, the better. And then you want to bring all of these inside and let them rest for 2 to 3 hours or even overnight in a cool room, in the air conditioned, and let them sit there. And I had to show you a picture. This is my gorilla cart, and I could not garden without it. Um, it holds, I think there are 3 smaller buckets, and I call them mop buckets. They're the size of mop buckets. And then the tall Home Depot, who didn't have a Home Depot bucket? That's what I strip my leaves of my flowers and put them in that bucket. Because you always want to strip the foliage. The foliage doesn't last as long as the flower does. So I add my own foliage and strip the leaves off the flowers. But like I said, I could not garden without it's called a gorilla cart. I think my son got it on Amazon. Okay, let's talk about some arranging basics. When you're arranging flowers, you want to consider lots of different shapes and colors of containers. And the containers need to be clean enough to drink out of. And this is a must, a must. And also your buckets that you're taking outside to bring your flowers in from the garden, these need to be clean enough to drink out of as well. You don't want to introduce any bacteria into any of your flowers because that will make them decline. You want to add cool water to the vase until it's like 3/4 full and put flower food. Flower food is essential to help the longevity of your flowers. Strip away all the foliage that's below the water line. And I like to use like a third, a third, a third. A third focal flowers. These are your POW flowers. They're usually bigger. They're usually more colorful. Doesn't have to be, but they're usually the bigger flowers. That's where your eye goes. And so you want to have about a third of those. Then a third of the filler flowers. These are the smaller flowers, maybe a little more insignificant, but still important. And then you want to have about a third of foliage. And I like to use lots of different foliage. There's so many different colors of green. I like to use a lot of Dusty Miller. That's not green, that's silver. Coleus, there's so many pretty different colors of coleus. So anyway, use different colors of foliage. You want to recut the stem again before you put it into the arrangement, and you want to keep the arrangement out of sunlight and away from ripening fruit because it'll make it last longer. Change the water kind of routinely, maybe every 2 or 3 days. And the day after you make the arrangement, you want to check the water and make sure that the water level is up to where it needs to be because you've just recut all those stems and they're going to really be drinking up the water with the flower food. So you want to check the water there. These are some various plants that you can use for foliage. The picture on the left-hand side. And let me tell you, the sky is the limit. If you're unsure, if you like a leaf on a shrub, bring it inside, put it in the water, see if it works. One of my favorite is the Florida anise, and that's a really gets a really big shrub, but it's great in a flower arrangement. It'll last for like 3 weeks. The bucket on the left-hand side, that's all foliage that I've collected from my yard. There's lemon lime nandina, which is not an invasive nandina. Distilium, I use frost-proof gardenia. I mean, African basil, just so many different things that maybe you wouldn't even think about. And then the other two on the right-hand side, the little variegated leaf, that is a scented geranium, and I love to use those. So, a lot of herbs work great in flower arrangements. So kind of think about those type things. Okay, now I'd like to share with you a short demonstration on flower arranging. Good afternoon. Now that we've talked about planting, growing, harvesting your cutting garden and all your bounty from your cutting garden in your yard, let's talk about the really fun part, and that's putting together an arrangement with everything that you have grown. I want to talk a little bit about vases. There are so many different shapes, colors, sizes of vases. There's tons of clear, there are some colored, and then you have vases that are multicolored. And you want to be sure that when you do an arrangement in one of those vases, that you kind of stick to the colors that are on the vase. It's very important for your vase to be super clean. It needs to be clean enough to drink out of. Some of my vases I would not ever have wanted to drink out of. But here's what I found that works for me. Once you're done with your arrangement, wash your vase out and then put some warm water in it and squirt some Dawn Power Wash in your vase and just let it set for at least 2 hours. And what that's going to do, Dawn Power Wash is great. It's going to get all that gunk up. And then if it's really, really dirty, let it sit overnight. It's not going to hurt a thing. And then take a baby bottle brush. This is the one I had for my children when they were babies, so it's very old. But they still make them. And wash around, rub around the vase really good. And that's going to get rid of any bacteria that's in your vase. It's very important not to introduce bacteria into your vase because that's the #1 killer of flowers is bacteria. Also, when you're prepping your flowers and your foliage to get ready to put them in the vase, try to strip off as much of the leaves as you can because we don't want any leaves below the water line. This is the water line here because that can cause bacteria. You always want to use floral food. This not only feeds your plants, your flowers, but it also has an antibacterial. So that will help with the bacteria. Okay, let's get started. And as I'm demonstrating this, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the elements that I used for my arrangements. So one of the things I love to use is coleus. And let me tell you, there are so many different types of coleus. And these came from our greenhouse that we grow many, many coleus for our garden fair in the spring. And if you have a vase that you're going to see the whole arrangement from all sides, you want to turn it as you go. So I'll turn it this way. This is Dusty Miller New Look. This is a new Dusty Miller that I've started growing this year, and I really, really do like it. I'll put a couple of those there. I'll do another one of the coleus. Okay. And something else I like to use is hostas. They really kind of color your arrangement. And there's so many different kinds of hostas, and people grow a lot of hostas. And I just like to put those on the edge. Kind of gives it a nice collared effect. Okay, so let's get started with some of our larger, another thing I want to add in the center, this is called pineapple sage. And it is an herb, and it gets huge. It's supposed to be an annual. Mine's been a perennial for the past 2 years. And in the fall, you'll have long, spiky red blooms that the butterflies love them, but the hummingbirds go crazy. They fight each other for those blooms because they're in the fall and there's not a whole lot that they have access to. So I'm going to put that right in the center. That's pineapple sage. Okay, now let's start with our larger flowers. These are called your form flowers. This is one of my all-time favorites in the yard of everything. This is a shrub, and it's a hydrangea, and this is let me just stick this one right here. And you don't want everything to be the same height. You want different heights. Okay, and you can see we're kind of getting a little bit of shape. You want to continually turn it so you don't have anything kind of lopsided. But these hydrangeas are great, and they start off white. This is a hydrangea paniculata. What's the name of this?
Limelight.
Limelight, yeah, thank you. It starts off white, then it goes to green, and then towards the end of the season, you'll see a little bit of pink. So pretty, so pretty. Okay, this is another one that I love to grow, and this is a sedum. It's called Sedum Autumn Joy. And it starts off green. Here you have just green. This has a little touch of color. And then what happens is you go into the fall, you'll have a beautiful rosy color, and then in the dead of fall, it's going to be like a bronze color, but it's so pretty to use in your floral arrangements for the fall. So let me just spin this. And you also want to look from the top when you're arranging. If you're doing a very big arrangement sitting down, you'll probably need to put it on the floor and look at it, because you don't want to have any holes. Okay? And feel free to, once you put something in, pull it up a little bit. Okay. These are some alstroemeria that I just had, and I thought the color was pretty with what I'm going to be using with my zinnias. So we'll just put some of these in here. And it's a different shape. You don't want all of your flowers to be the same shape in your arrangement. You want variety. And these, I pre-cut all of these. So if it looks like everything's just the right size, it is, because I pre-cut. You'll probably have to cut some as you're designing. And you want really good, sharp snips for that. Okay, so I've got those in there. Now I'm going to start with my zinnias. And zinnia is my very favorite flower to grow. My very favorite is the Benary Giant. This is a Benary Giant, and it's the largest flower head of any zinnia that you can grow. They were designed for the flower growers that grow flowers and sell them. So let's start out with that one. I'm gonna turn, and I like a more cool color palette. You know, everybody has their own preference, and when you decided to grow, when you're into planning what you were growing for your cutting garden, you decided what color flowers you would like to grow. And usually when I get a packet of seed, I like for it just to be one color. There are multicolored packets that give you every color of that variety, but I really prefer a packet of just one color. Okay, starting to get full. I think I need a little more height, but I've got some African basil that I can put in here. Oops, I see a hole. See right there? Okay, let's fill that up. I think I need a little more foliage, and this is lemon basil. And this is something I grow for my arrangements. You can grow lemon basil, African basil, which I'm going to show you in just a minute, and cinnamon basil. I grow cinnamon basil, and all of those are culinary. So if you're giving this arrangement as a gift, not only are they getting a beautiful arrangement of flowers, but they get something they can use in their cooking. Okay, so I've got a little too much purple here, so I need to add, see what I'm talking about? So I'm going to add a little pink down here. Okay, I'm going to continue to turn it. It needs to come up a little bit. Okay, we're getting close. We're getting close. I need another zinnia right here. And next I'm going to add and I meant to mention, when you go to get your zinnias to put them in your arrangement, you want to cup them in your hand and hold them like this. Even though they have nice long stems, you don't want to take the chance of breaking off the stem. Yeah, I like that one there. Okay, so let's add some air. This is gomphrena, and it's great in floral arrangements. Oh, and it'll last forever. Some of these elements will last forever in your arrangements. Let's put one on this side right here. And this is verbena. It's not the verbena bonariensis, which is huge. I think it's like 4 feet tall. This is lollipop, and this just adds a little bit of height and a little bit of air to your arrangements. And I think I see a hole right here. Let's see if we can fill up that hole. And sometimes you don't even need extra things. You just kind of need to move things around a little bit. Yeah, color would go well there. Okay, and then the very last thing I'm going to do is put some African basil. This is a basil that's grown for its blooms. Most of the culinary basils, you want to pinch those blooms off, but this is grown for its blooms, and it's got these beautiful purple, let me turn it around this way, beautiful purple blooms. And I like to add this kind of as height, and also spikes. Could use another little verbena right here. Okay, you always want to go in at an angle with those. This could come out just a little bit. And I could keep messing with this, but really, it's done. And when you make an arrangement for yourself, you want it to be where you can see it at all times. This is my kitchen table, and I always have an arrangement on my kitchen table. I always have one by my sink, even if I'm not cooking, I'm washing dishes. Thanks so much for joining me today, and enjoy the bounty of your yard, bringing it inside. Okay, welcome back. And I do apologize for the volume. We tried to get it louder and it just didn't work. So I'd like to go over the flowers that I used in my flower arrangement. I started with two different types of coleus. There was Dusty Miller, which is the new look Dusty Miller. And I had some hostas, and I'm sorry, I don't know what kind those were. It's just some I've had in my yard for a while. Pineapple sage, limelight hydrangea, those were the hydrangeas. Sedum autumn joy, alstroemeria, and I didn't grow that. That's the only thing I didn't grow. I just happened to have those. Zinnias, and the type of zinnias that I used in my arrangement, I used Veneri Giant, which are the largest. The Oklahoma series, which they have beautiful, beautiful zinnias. They're a little bit smaller. And then I used some of the Queen series, and they're a little bit smaller as well, but they have multicolored blooms, and they're just really so pretty. And then I used lemon and African basil. African basil was what I used at the very last. And for air, the gomphrena, which is a pink gomphrena, and the lollipop verbena. So I hope this inspires you to grow some flowers, make some arrangements for yourself and others. I'd like to talk a little bit about what I use in my gardening. And the first thing are my flower snips and my pruners. And these are manufactured by ARS. I believe I got them from Johnny's Seeds. And the reason I use these is because I follow several flower growers, and that's what they like to use. They're very sharp. And you always want to clean these every so often with an alcohol swab, because as you cut, you're going to get the sap on your uh, blades. So anyway, but these are the pruners and the flower snips, and I love I love the red handle because I'm always losing my flower snips. And here again, we have the gardening journal. And we talked about my gorilla cart, my wagon that I just can't garden without, and the buckets, and they're just, mop buckets is what I call them. The flower food, there are two companies that make the majority of the flower food, Crisol or Floral Life, and either one is great. Either one. And now seed sources. Okay, I have listed four, but oh my goodness, there are so many. These are the ones I use the most, but I've used other seeds. So just, look around, check them out. Johnny's has vegetable and flower seeds. And I'm trying to think if some of the others have vegetable. I think they do, they might. But anyway, these definitely have the flower seeds. The botanical interest you can find in garden centers, and the others you will have to order. Okay, books. I could talk forever about gardening books. What gardener doesn't love gardening books? Um, these are just some of my favorites. I will say, if you're interested in starting a cutting garden, A Year in Flowers by Erin Benzacane and Growing Flowers by Nikki Irving, I would suggest those two. They're both flower farmers. They have flower farms. And Nikki lives in North Carolina, so her climate is very similar to ours, a little bit cooler. And Erin lives in Washington State. So her climate is going to be different, but really the basics that they talk about as far as setting up your cutting garden. The reason I like Erin's book is because in the back she lists so many different flowers and when to harvest and all of that. So they're both really great. The other two are just, they're eye candy. I just love them. I wanted to start my presentation and end my presentation with some beauty. When you stop and smell the flowers, life is sweet. Witness the beautiful in all that you meet. Don't you just love that? Sometimes we need to stop and smell the flowers. I've heard it said that flowers are food for the soul. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Um, Many of us gardeners, probably all of us gardeners, when we started gardening, we had parents, grandparents, even friends of the family that shared their love of gardening, their love of flowers with us. And I challenge you to pass that on, to share that with your children, with your grandchildren. Borrow a child, but pass that love of flowers and gardening on to the next generation. I hope I've encouraged you to grow more flowers and maybe perhaps even start a cutting garden. I would like to think so. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure. I'd like to mention that the Georgia Green Landscape Stewards Program is created by the University of Georgia Extension and is a certification program for businesses and residences in Georgia. And if you're interested in this, please Google the website at the bottom of this page. Okay, Dana, do we have any questions?
Hi, thank you. Yes, we do. Um,
Great.
First question, any tips for growing ranunculus? Should I plant them now?
You know what? I have looked, very good question. I have looked at ranunculus and thought about growing it and never have. So I'm sorry. I can't help you at all. They're beautiful. I would love to learn to grow them, but I have no experience with that. I'm sorry.
All right, next question. What type of mulch do you recommend? I worry that seedlings might not be able to break through heavy mulches.
You want to be careful when after you plant your seed. And I think I would hold off mulching until the seeds start to sprout, until you know exactly where they are. And then you can mulch around it. What I use is a very fine ground mulch. But I do wait till my seedlings come up a little bit so I know where they are. And once you know where your seedlings are, you can safely put a light mulch. You don't want anything really heavy, but just something to hold the moisture in and just keep the water in. So everything will stay watered nice and good.
All right, I think in your presentation you addressed this, but somebody asked the question, what do you use for quote unquote flower food?
Okay. I use an organic fertilizer. Uh, don't remember the name of it, but um, there are organic and there are not organic. I garden organically, so I do use an organic fertilizer. I will tell you that organic fertilizers are considered slow release. The numbers on the bag, the NPK, the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, the numbers will be lower because it's a time release. It doesn't, according to the government, you can't say that it has that much of nitrogen unless it's immediately released. And organic fertilizers do not work that way. You want something for bloom. So if you go to the garden center, tell them you're growing a cutting garden and you want something to help bloom. And I do believe it doesn't need to have a high nitrogen number, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, thank you. Are most of these cut flowers deer resistant?
Oh dear. Um, where I garden, I really don't have to worry about deer, so I can't answer that because I've never had deer invade my cutting garden. Um, I don't know. You, the University of Georgia does have a publication that talks about deer resistant plants. There's nothing that's totally deer resistant. You can get a publication from the University of Georgia through the Extension Service that will list deer resistant plants. But good luck with that. I would say be sure and spread some type of deer deterrent, the liquid fence or something like that, if you are, because you would hate for the deer to come eat your flowers. Um,
Yeah, and I've also used some of those little wire bins that they sell at the Dollar Tree or Dollar Store, and you can turn it upside down over the emerging plant so that the deer don't, nibble at it as it's starting to grow.
okay.
Okay, another question. Can you suggest native plants that have interesting flowers?
Okay. Dana had just handed me a list. I will say that I do grow yarrow. I don't grow it exactly in my cutting garden. And a lot of flowers I grow are not in my cutting garden, but they're in my landscape. And I do use them for flower arrangements. And yarrow is a good one. Yarrow is a native. Some of the other native plants are southern mountain mint, and mountain mint is really pretty in an arrangement too. It's kind of got that silvery color. Cardinal flower, different kind of asters. You see a lot of the asters blooming this time of year, especially the purples. Magnolia, purple coneflower, and black-eyed Susan are natives, and they work great in a flower arrangement. And blue false indigo, so those are just some of the natives, and we really all need to be using more natives. Thank you for asking that question. That was great.
What was the tall foliage plant that you put in your arrangement on the video?
Okay, the very last one that I put in, I think that's what she's referring to, and that would be African basil. And it is a basil, but it's, I don't know that you would use it culinary wise. But it's beautiful in floral arrangements. I love it. It's got those purple, long stem, purple, spiky flowers. So pretty. I think that's what she's referring to.
Yes. What is the name of that zinnia that has the largest flower head? Something giant?
Yes, Benary Giant. And they come in every color, probably except for blue. They come in every color. And I will tell you that you can buy the seed packets of those in the garden centers, but they're multicolored. If you just want one color, you will have to order that from a seed company.
Okay. Where do you purchase your African basil, Pat?
Sometimes the garden centers carry African basil. That would be the basil that, other than the sweet basil that people grow to use culinary wise, that would be the one that you would find. I have found, I love to go to the Alphabet Farmers Market or any farmers market. They're so fun. But there is a gentleman there that sells herbs and vegetables, and he is there in the spring. Now, probably not till maybe end of April, 1st of May, but he usually has all kind of the basils if I can't find them anyplace else. I can usually count on him having those.
Great. How do you keep your flowers from getting too hot and not burned while you're growing them in a metal container?
Okay. Um, Good question. Good question. I would mulch them very heavily and just make sure that you continue to keep them watered because they're going to be in the sun. The metal's going to be in the sun, and that's going to be hot. So, other than that, I don't really have any answers for you. Sorry. Um, I have seen zinnias growing in the big animal troughs. They're gorgeous. They're so pretty. Um, Now, zinnias is one that can really take the heat. It's native to South America, so it can really take the heat. So I would suggest if you're going to grow in a metal container, make sure something that you're going to plant something like a zinnia that, even zinnia, once they get established, they're even a little bit drought tolerant, which is great for an annual. So I would suggest using something like a zinnia because it's going to hold up.
Yeah, and I've seen some of those metal troughs. People paint the exterior white
Mhm.
so that it doesn't reflect so
Ah,
much heat. So it's less pretty, perhaps, if you want that farmhouse look, but it's more purposeful.
okay, good idea. Good idea.
Do you have any tips for growing bells of Ireland?
Bells of Ireland, yes, I have grown bells of Ireland. And as well as I remember, mine did not do well when it gets hot. It likes it a little cooler. There's a lot of things like that. I mean, we can grow like the zinnias and the cosmos and the sunflowers. We can go things that love the heat. But the plants that don't like as much heat are not going to survive when we start to have the heat. So I would do a little research. I'd look on the packet, but seems like I grew my bells of Ireland when it was cooler, and then I've only grown it once, and then when it started to get really hot, it didn't do as well. So I hope that helps.
We're,
Um,
we're getting on in time. I'll ask one more question. What is the tall green plant in the pictures with your granddaughter?
that is bells of Ireland. Uh,
Perfect.
yes, I did not grow that,
Yeah.
but
And,
yeah,
and
but
there were
that's
Oh, go on. I'm sorry. There were a
no.
few other questions, Pat, but the one asking, do you start any seeds inside under lights? Do you ever use pre-soiled pods to add water to and place a seed in? You did not do that in this, and you typically, I understand, start them right in the ground, right?
I do. I direct seed. I've tried a few times, and you need the either a greenhouse, you need grow lights for them to be done correctly. And I have neither, and I've had really good success with direct seeding. I have tried to plant a few seeds in the little pea pots outside when it warms up a little bit, and those have been successful. But I really have good success doing direct seeding, and it's easier than you think. It really is.
All right, that's all that we have time for in terms of questions, Pat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dana. If you'd like to learn more about the North Fulton Master Gardeners, you can check out all of our social media outlets. And if you'd like to donate to the Master Gardeners, we are a totally volunteer organization, and we have so many worthwhile projects. We maintain gardens and historic homes. We do education for adults as well as children. We go into schools and teach children, and we offer scholarships for horticulture students. So if you'd like to help us out with some of those, we would be glad for you to do so. Please don't forget to fill out your survey. Tell us what you liked about today's presentation, what you would change, any subjects that we can cover or even expand on that we really didn't talk enough about today that you'd like for us to see, like to see us talk a little more about. I want to thank you again for joining me today to share about a subject that I'm very passionate about, and that's cutting flowers. And I hope it inspires you to grow more flowers or possibly even to grow your own cutting garden. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye.